Hi, everybody. As we move out of ethics in general, and we start moving into specific issues that will give us some intellectual headaches and some perhaps moral headaches as we try to decide what positions are for us, I wanted to discuss what is meant by conscience formation, at least in the Catholic tradition. The first thing that I want to do with you is distinguish it from a feeling. I think the term conscience gets used pretty loosely. I'm going to just go with my conscience and choose cake over pie, or I'm going to go with my conscience and stay up late tonight beyond my curfew. I'm not sure that's what is meant by defining a conscience, and I'm not even sure if that's what we mean if I'm trying to do a big discernment project, like to try to decide, do I leave my home state to go to college, or do I stay close by home? Those are important decisions, but I wouldn't say that they have a moral character to them necessarily. So let's decide what it is, and then I'll help you with the steps in conscience formation. If we want to make the very best use we can out of the faculties we have to choose wisely. First, conscience in the Catholic Catechism is defined as a judgment of reason whereby the human person recognizes the moral quality of a concrete choice he or she is about to make, or is in the process of making, or perhaps has already been made and acted upon. Sometimes insights about what the right and wrong of what I do kind of gnaw at me later, and I have to look backwards to recognize that I have made a moral mistake. For Christians, this is believed to be our access to the voice of God within us that calls us to do good. I would say, even for atheists, though, the sentiment that we have a conscience, that we have this inner mechanism that agitates us when we're deciding wrongly and that feels secure when we're deciding right, it seems to be a universal experience, a universal sensation that we can tell the difference between our rights and wrongs. And so we want to sophisticate the process for forming these consciences. They don't just come naturally. Sometimes they need a little work. So step one, to recognize as we approach an issue, you and I could go out in the streets and ask any person on the block if they have an opinion about a complicated moral issue, and they probably have one. But where did that come from? It's natural to admit our first impressions, but critical to admit these could prevent us from thinking honestly about all the perspectives. And some of these biases might be my gender. It's conceivable that I just can't see a female point of view until I stop and listen to one. I assume I had the whole story in my head, but I had not thought of that. I trust I will be able to give you guys some perspective on abortion that none of you has read so far. For example, it's just not in the national debate. Second, by the way, on that one, most of the national debate is carried on by males. It would be interesting to look at all the issues to see if there's a gender difference. Second, my age could color my attitude about a thing. It's possible in my middle age that I have attitudes about things and I feel quite confident about them that could well be informed by you people who are perhaps more in touch with the teen life, with what it's like to be your age and so on. I might learn something from you and shift my opinion a little bit as I do so. Likewise, for you. My religious background certainly colors my sense of right and wrong. If I have an opinion right away about many things, it may very well be the opinion of my parish priest or the Catholic Church in general, or my Jewish rabbi. It's possible that those opinions are pretty strongly embedded in me even before I think for myself. My nationalism, no doubt, U.S. citizens have attitudes about things that other people in the world shake their heads at. They can't believe we think like we do. So let's admit, at least, that it is partly an American attitude, and we want to listen to other attitudes to make good choices. You might be able to think of another influence on your initial bias. But in each of these cases, to listen to the other might bring some truth to the story that was not there before. Second, we want to seek some relevant input if these decisions are important ones. And I'll show you what I mean by that. First of all, the decisions that we make have consequences. for the people around us, in relationship with us, do they not? It is natural for us because we're people in relationship, we belong to communities, to families, to schools, parishes, and nations, to seek the input of wiser elders and experts in the field. Why these healthcare decisions have a requirement for us to learn from medical experts. We don't know all the answers to that. So the next thing is to assure the integrity. We really need to respectfully listen to some contrary perspectives. What the heck good would it be for us to get all of our friends around us to ask them if they think we should or should not do this thing? Of course, you'll all agree with us and support us. That's not necessarily the most helpful or resourceful input that we could get. If any intelligent person has a contradictory opinion, it would be wise for me to listen to it, even if I don't agree. The relevance of which people I would ask would vary according to the issue. The picture I have here, it warms my heart to think that some of us could have such good relationships with parents that could be a first go-to for many of the issues we have. But I know what teens are like. Many teens would go any number of places before a parent when they have a difficult moral issue to figure out. That would be unfortunate, but we're all different on that. So whom should I ask? I think it kind of depends on what the issue is. Let me show you what I mean. If I'm having trouble deciding whether or not I might participate in a war with Iran if I get drafted, those are very heavy things. Maybe I'm not necessarily anti-war, but I have information about the Iranian situation that makes it inauthentic for me to participate. How do I weigh all that and decide what to do? Right? There could be consequences for me if I choose to not participate. God forbid someday we have to make this decision, but it's possible. Should I ask the doctor to stop treating my aging father with incurable cancer? Obviously, the doctor or a team of them would be excellent source of information, but that wouldn't be the only source, would it? Who else would I ask about that? Who else would you seek input for if you're a 50-year-old person? Perhaps you have siblings, perhaps you have aunts and uncles, perhaps a lawyer. A lot of these things are hard to figure out, and we certainly don't want to make a decision and realize later, oh, I didn't think about A or B. This personal decision might feel very private. I might not want people to know what's going on with the relationship, but for gosh sakes, I need some support and some input. Who should I ask? What would be some good sources of information or input for this problem? Counselors, friends, children, perhaps, depending on their age. This might seem a little silly for most people, but I've heard it said that it creates a moral dilemma for people. Should my wife and I use birth control, even though we're Catholic? Well, whom should I ask about that? Certainly, we want to speak with each other about it, but we might want more input. Maybe there are medical issues. The pregnancy threatens my wife. Perhaps I need some physician input about this. Maybe I have a huge respect for my parish priest, and he could help me reconcile church teachings with my own need to follow my conscience and so on. It would be very helpful to me. Next idea, should I be open to sexual intercourse in my high school dating? Now this would be a very hard one to seek adult input from, but wouldn't it be nice if we could speak to, if not a parent, to a favorite aunt or uncle, someone who's got the wisdom of age and who remembers what it's like to be a teenager, who might have some perspective, some long-term experience to share with me. It would be nice to hear about, other than just my friends at school. If my partner and I abort a fetus we know has developmental issues that we can see by ultrasound, that would be a terrible, difficult question, but it was asked of us. We were asked if we wanted to do a certain test during pregnancy, and the only reason that was given why we might is because we might want to abort if X or Y syndrome were to be found in your fetus. It was a very, it's a crazy thought. We really had to think, would we want such a test? Do we want to think that way? I won't tell you how we thought about it, but These are hard questions, and with whom might we visit for some input about that? Step three, once we seek some input and get kind of overwhelming, we probably have a couple of alternatives in mind, and we want to spend some time just really quietly, prayerfully, contemplatively resting with the alternatives and feeling what it feels like in our chest. It might be the case that we just really want to go ahead with this decision, but in our quietest space, we just feel anxious about it. We feel edgy or almost nauseated. It does not, we have to listen to these sensations if they don't feel authentic. Also, it may just resonate. We may feel so affirmed as we imagine ourselves a year from now with this choice made. It feels so good to us, but it's just a question we have to sit with. And that's what we mean by this. And so it reveals a lot. And I would say, even for non-Catholics or non-Christians, this time is critical. For Catholics, it's often considered to be the asking of God's voice to be clear within us, for us to have the strength to hear it honestly. The next step, then, of course, we've done the, we've had an initial opinion, we've sought input, we've spent some time praying over it. Probably it's becoming pretty clear what we ought to do if we're going to be honest with ourselves. It doesn't necessarily, though, make it easy to do, does it? Sometimes the best moral choice is not the easiest one, especially short term. Sometimes the best moral choice could cost me some popularity at school or some superficial relationships. I say superficial because, in my opinion, really good relationships would never want me, would never coax me to doing something that's inauthentic for me. Even if it was my own boyfriend or girlfriend, they would want what's best and truest for me. This relationship is a good one. It is promised, and my experience affirms it, that habitually choosing my moral right is what leads to my lifelong happiness. And when I look back over my own story and find my periods of unhappiness, I can continuously see the pattern that I did not choose wisely. I made some poor or short-term moral decisions. You think we're finished, but in truth, we can still reflect back and remain open. There's no guarantee that after all this work, the decision will turn out right. All I can decide is that I'm making my best decision. And if in the end it turns out either outcomes I did not anticipate, I might have to shift my conscience. I might have to say, if I had the chance to do it over again, I would do it differently. I've learned something that I did not learn before. Outcomes can surprise us and teach us something new. Also, our moral consciousness unfolds over time. What at 18 seems absolutely honestly right for me may not be so when I'm 25. I may have a more liberated attitude of right and wrong, and I may grow more conservative on certain matters over time. I have to remain true to who I am at the time. Also, collectively, we have impressions of what's right and wrong in our society that 100 years ago were very different. I can offer you slavery, which for some mind-boggling reason was a morally acceptable thing for otherwise intelligent church-going people some time ago in our country, right? Now the tides are shifting, consciousness is shifting pretty dramatically about same-sex relationships and so on. It's a very interesting time to be watching. We just have like this morality falling apart like a house of cards, or are people waking up gradually over time to realities that they just were too stubbornly not open to in the past. It's an interesting time to watch. I won't suggest either way, but just to tell you that in many subjects, our conscience unfolds over time. And it's important to just remember with some humility that 50 years from now, we may look back in some shame at our opinions today. In medicine, things are changing every day, of course. And in summary, what's at stake for us is as good a way as we can navigate our relationships and our decision making, and long-term happiness is at stake. Hope this helps as we move into our issues.